Susan Naimark is a community builder, writer, and marathoner who has written a new book called The Education of a White Parent, Wrestling with Race and Opportunity in the Boston Public Schools. She joins us this morning. Good morning, Susan.
Good morning, Rick and Scott.
Hey, Susan. So, you're raising a family, doing life with children in the Boston Public School system, which has a very interesting history in and of itself. And you begin to notice something that's wrong. So how did all that begin?
I think it all began really by just choosing to send my kids, who are white, middle-class boys, to an urban public school. And I made that decision because I grew up going to public schools, and wherever you live, that was just where I thought they should go. And I did get an education around race and privilege.
And you saw things in terms of the way your book talks about it, the performance levels were completely different between your kids and kids of color in classrooms. What was going on there? What were you seeing that just didn't seem to be right?
Well, what I was seeing, the first thing I was seeing was, I got involved because there are problems in the schools, and I believe you got to work together when you see problems. So I was involved with the parent organization and with a citywide parent organization, and I just saw this. First, it was just a consistent pattern of, the test scores. So why are the Black and Latino test scores the average half the white and Asian test scores? And these were kids I knew, they're not half as smart. And then you kind of peel back the layers and you see, there's some discipline stuff and the kids are treated differently, and there's some extra privileges at the school, and why are those, like being on the student newspaper, and why are those kind of things all white in a school that's 85% kids of color? So,
interesting.
There's just layers of things where, and these are kids going through the same classrooms as my kids. It wasn't even like they were in separate tracks, and you see all of these decisions that the adults are making that further encourage my kids and put up barriers for kids of color.
When you began to see these things and they began to reveal themselves to you, what was the first thing that you did?
Well, it's interesting because I think the first thing I did was just observe. And I wrote the book because I was not comfortable talking about race. And I think a lot of us, especially white people, certainly aren't brought up to talk about race. And like all these things are happening around you, and they're very racialized, but I didn't know how to talk about it. Then when I couldn't stand it anymore because it's like, this is just not right, I started talking with the other white middle-class parents because that's who I was most comfortable talking to. And it was only over time that I realized, that's not right either, because I'm only getting the perspectives of people who think like me.
Yes.
You know?
Well, and they're probably denying it, right, Susan? Aren't they giving
what
you
responses
a pushback?
did you get?
Well, it's interesting. Some people were like, it's not right, and other people got very defensive. And I find that to this day that sometimes it's the white sort of liberal people who get the most defensive because the last thing we want is for someone to accuse us of being racist. So we don't even bring up the conversation to protect ourselves. I would submit. That's not how they would describe it, but I see a lot of defensive-ness, making excuses and just not wanting to talk about it.
But you came to a place where you're kind of moving through some of these pushbacks, however fierce they may be, and you're saying, I got to do something about this. I'm going to keep going.
Right.
What kind of kept you going beyond those lines that were kind of in front of you?
Well, people ask that a lot, like, what kept you going? Because I was involved in citywide organizing and raising my kids and kind of doing all these things, that were just making me very busy. And I think it really goes back to my own upbringing. And, I grew up in suburban Detroit where, we didn't talk about race, but I grew up in a Jewish family. And I was always taught that, Jews had been oppressed through history and that whenever there's injustice, we're next in line. Whether that was true or not, that was a very deep thing that was ingrained in me.
Talk about us sooner or later.
Yeah, I think there's so the first reaction I think really came from that, and then of course over a long period of time I realized, well, I might feel like I could be next in line, but I'm still getting the same privileges that all these other white folks are getting, and that was a whole other level of learning that happened, kind of down the line.
There's a phrase called the bigotry of low expectation, and it sounds like that's what you encountered. What was when you began to build a broader base coalition with the parents of color? What did you learn from them? What did you see from them?
Well, there was one incident that I think describes it well, which is when we realized that the teachers who were considered the better teachers in the school had all the white kids.
Interesting.
And so we brought it up at a parent meeting. We said, we brought the principal, and we said, so why is that? And the white parents all piped up, well, I go in June, and I tell the principal what teacher I want. And it really was almost a complete racial divide. And this is across class, because there were middle-class parents of color there, too, of parents of color saying, I didn't know you could do that.
Ooh.
And it made me realize that people's interactions with the schools and what they thought they were entitled to were very different in terms of just how they approach the school and how they, interact with it in terms of their children.
Kind of like a mindset of around entitlement, really.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
and then, I dug a little deeper, and, people around the country know about our history in terms of the desegregation of our schools in the 1970s.
Yes.
That hit a lot of white violence and resistance. But, in fact, what I learned much more recently, was that the black community in Boston had been petitioning the school board for equity and quality schools since 1798.
Good
What?
Lord.
Yeah, so you realize this is 200 years, and you wonder why parents don't feel comfortable coming to school? No.
Wow.
And it was year after year. I could go on. It was like 6 or 8 different times over 200 years that led up to the NAACP lawsuit in the 1960s. So then you wonder why parents don't come to school.
Yeah.
There's a long history of not being welcome, and worse.
Well, and because the mindset among those parents is nobody's going to do anything anyway. If they haven't done it for 200 years, what's going to happen now?
Exactly.
Wow.
So then, in your book, Susan, as you wrote it, and I mean, the process. It sounds like, and I could be wrong, but it sounds like this was more of a cathartic process for you, so you can work through some things as well, and you hope that it's going to teach some other folks too. Who's your audience? Is it white parents, or is it just the broader multi-ethnic community, or who are you trying to really reach in this book?
I think the primary audience is white parents, because I see the things we do that for our individual kid that we are, that so many white parents do, that they think, well, we're just helping our own kids, but in fact, are we doing things that get in the way for the larger group to do
Interesting.
well?
And here's the and I know you face this within yourself. I face it all the time. We are the most toxic when we don't know what we're doing. Do you know what I'm saying? In other words, like you're saying, well, I'm just advocating for my kid. What's wrong with that? And not even aware of what's in front of your face. And when you see all the white kids there with the best teacher, then we're not doing what's right for our kid. We're doing what's wrong for a whole bunch of other kids. You know what I mean?
Even for our own kid, though, because what message is that telling to our own kids?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, and I think that we don't even know what we don't know.
Oh,
Yes.
Yeah.
When it comes to race, and I guess when people write personal books, there's a certain element of therapy, right? That's out of that. But I've been doing a number of book talks now, and what I find is that there are a lot of people that want to have these conversations around race and are just afraid.
Yeah.
And so to say, I was afraid, I got beat up, but that's how you learn. If you don't ask questions
That's
and
right.
name things, you're never going to learn and never going to get anywhere.
Yeah, well, really, I'm just really happy that you wrote this book and you took on the challenge, Susan. First of all, so congratulations, and secondly, the reason that we don't talk amongst communities is because, we don't have a language for it, and books and resources like yours give us a language to do that.
Right.
It's like expecting someone to move to a country and speak the language in the first year. Mm-hmm. You may get it; it may be operational, but it takes about 7 years, to really get into the details of a language. And this language around cultural competency, diversity, racism, supremacy, all these different things, that's a language, and we aren't going to talk with each other unless authors like you, and movement makers like you really decide, I'm going to do something about it. So, congratulations on this.
Well, thank you.
And the other thing, metaphorically, of course, you're a marathoner. So that in running,
she got a different education on marathon this time.
Oh, hey, let me tell you.
No, this is a long haul process.
But as you know, one of the things about marathons, and I have only done half marathons here myself, you have to save something for the end. You can't spend it all, and that's the